Hello. How are you all? Just gonna give it another minute, see if anyone else is gonna join, and then we'll get started. All right, I want to respect your time. I don't want to hold anyone up today, but thank you so much for joining the OEE final workshop in our series for this fall semester. Today, we're going to be talking about including the student voice in assessment. I'm Krista Emma. I'm here with my fabulous colleague, Diana Jernigan Brady. And we're really excited today to be joined by two of our student leaders. So Courtney and Isabel, would you introduce yourselves?
Hi, everyone. My name is Courtney Hamer. I'm currently a junior who's majoring in economics and minoring in real estate of insurance, and I'm also one of the Office of Educational Effectiveness student assistants. Nice to meet you all.
Hi everyone, I'm Isabel Stakely. I am one of the leaders for the Student Assessment Council. I am majoring in political science and I am a senior. I'm also part of the OEE student assistant team.
And just because we're a smaller group, if our guests wouldn't mind introducing yourselves as well.
Hello, my name is Hank Hardy. I am the Student Success Specialist out of the Student Life Office. And my function while I'm here is to help students gain a greater sense of connectedness to the university and have a greater sense of feeling that this is the place they belong.
Hey everyone, my name is Sarah. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a residence hall director in campus residences. And specifically in my role on the committee that I serve on, our professional staff recruitment, selection, training, and development committee. I'm one of our assessment reps for that committee. So I am tasked with creating assessment initiatives each semester. So nice to meet y'all.
And Hannah, I don't know if you're able to unmute. Could you tell us about your role if you're available?
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Actually, it's with my camera. So hi everyone, my name is Hannah Morales Hernandez. I am a postdoctoral associate in the Center for Inclusive Education and the Office of Postdoctoral Affairs, and I'm actually responsible for assessment of the programs run by the Center for Inclusive Education. So that's why I have joined this series.
All right, awesome. Thank you all so much for joining. Sounds like we got a little bit of a mix, but everyone kind of has their hand in assessment, which is great.
Okay, so we talked about the Student Assessment Council. This is fairly new that OEE is doing. The Office of Educational Effectiveness currently works with just mostly faculty, so this is why we started to say, let's get the voice of our students and let's create a student council. So some of our objectives are: one, evaluate the benefits of including student voice in assessment. Two, discuss strategies to incorporate student voice in your program assessment process. And three, hear from current students on how SBU is incorporating student voice in assessment at an institutional level.
Okay, so we're going to get into just sort of the basics of student voice, then we'll talk a little bit about strategies we can use, and then we'll turn it over to our students to talk a little bit more about their assessment council. So first up, what is student voice? Courtney, take it away.
Well, student voice is the inclusion of student opinions, thoughts, and experiences into assessment planning and practices to inform pragmatic changes. And it's also ongoing reflective self-assessment expressed in the words of the learner for the purpose of improving teaching and learning.
So we get into why student voice is important to assessment. An assessment done entirely by staff or faculty cannot give a full picture of student learning. It does rely on implicit assumptions about the experience of students. And it doesn't offer the diverse and rich blend of what students can offer. So I always say, how often do we make decisions on behalf of students, either at a program level or institutional level, department level as well? But we haven't actually asked students for their feedback or have them incorporated at all. So we're working for students, but we need to have their voice be a pivotal point in what we do strategically.
All right, and then this is just a quick comparison of student involvement versus student voice. I think, at Stony Brook, we're really good at student involvement. We're always encouraging students to give feedback. We've got campus-wide, the pulse surveys, course evaluations. We're constantly collecting different kinds of quantitative and qualitative data about the student experience. But student voice really makes it that more intentional purpose of using that data for decision making. It's important in making these student-faculty partnerships where students feel like they're really engaged in their learning or their student experience here on campus and feel like they have a sense of co-ownership over the experience.
Now we have this spectrum where on the lower end, it's, really expression, and on the higher end would be leadership and having an actual role in decision making. But I also have to think of this as, doing things in tandem. So for instance, if you have a focus group or you have a survey and you're thinking of consultation, that second bucket, you can also add leadership on top where students are actually creating the questions, or you've vetted the questions that are going to be asked for the focus group and surveyed by students. So that way you're doing both consultation and leadership when it comes to the student voice. So it doesn't have to be in silos, doesn't have to be in steps. You can do things in tandem.
And then just one other cool visual that we found along the way when we were researching student voice is sort of these 4 principles of how to incorporate student voice into assessment. And we'll talk about these further, but make sure it stays flexible, inclusive, promote student ownership, and give students choice along the way. And I really like this quote that incorporating student voice helps students act more like stakeholders and partners in their education rather than just passive recipients of information. So I think, as faculty and as staff, sometimes we feel like, oh, we're this sage on the stage. We're going to tell students everything they need to know, and that'll be that. But really, you want them co-creating to be engaged in that experience along with you. All right, so some tips for how to get started on, where do I begin with student voice in the assessment process? It really starts by cultivating assessment awareness, right? Students don't necessarily know what the assessment process is when they're, in your course or in your program. So be intentional about sharing your learning objectives, whether they're co-curricular, course, or program level with students. So include them on your syllabus, your program handbook, your department website, assignment descriptions, any evaluative criteria that you're sharing with them, just to get them familiar with it. Then take that a step further and make sure you're explaining it, how the things that you're doing in class or in your program relate to the achievement of those learning objectives, and make those links really purposeful and explicit to students. Ask students to reflect on it, right? Do you think that you're achieving these PLOs? Do you think that we're addressing these objectives? And that can be informal, whether that's, just conversation in class or, during your programming, getting, muddiest point, sort of exit ticket takeaways, or formal methods like surveys, pre and post tests, reflective assignments, and self-assessments. And then most importantly, make sure you're sharing that data with students. So of course, de-identify it, don't include anything that would be revealing about an individual student, but do it in a way that promotes transparency, that shows that you're using this assessment data for something so that students see the value in completing these exercises. And then it can also help promote community building, right? That students see, okay, I'm not the only one that was really struggling with what that objective meant or how I'm achieving it in my course or program.
We have 2 practical strategies that you can use to incorporate the student voice, and the first would be surveys. So they both have some, they have some pros and cons and some ways that we can strengthen them. So pros are always it's fair process to gather information. It's pretty easy to design and administer them, and you can take the data and disaggregate it. However, the cons, and this is usually the thorns when it comes to surveys, is that you have a low response rate. So you put all this effort in and then you're hardly get any students to really respond to your surveys. And a lot of this can be due to survey fatigue because you're not the only one that's sending out surveys and emails to students here on campus. Survey options may not represent the full range of opinions when it comes to what students really want to tell you. And then students are not sure if their input is valued or used. So a lot of times they do these surveys, but they have no idea of what happens afterwards. So one way to strengthen this is to have students create or review the questions, like I mentioned previously, to give them that leadership component. Report out the broad themes and findings from the survey respondents. So what Kristen mentioned before, be as transparent as you possibly can be. And then highlight how your previous surveys have resulted in some kind of programmatic or strategic change. So you want to make sure that, yes, I've done this survey and it was meaningful, and because of it, we have made changes, like real changes based on what you have said. Another strategy are focus groups and feedback sessions. So the pros for them, you get rich qualitative data, it's authentic, it's nuanced. It can improve partnerships between students, faculty, and staff because students feel empowered to tell you how they truly feel about a certain topic. A con, again, is that student participation. So even when you incentivize your focus group or your feedback session, you may still find that student participation is low. And it's also a lot of administrative work on the person who is leading or facilitating the focus group. So it's, setting up the focus group, setting up the surveys, setting up the questions, setting up the scheduling, the registering, transcribing. So it does take a lot of work. If you can somehow split this up with those students, those student partners, this might make it a little bit more palatable for you. To strengthen it, we suggest that you make it more of an activity. So it's like activity-based and it's more engagement, that you review and react to PLO or an assessment method as a group, and then to create a student-friendly environment. So this may mean that you have to go to their spaces to facilitate these focus groups and feedback sessions to get more buy-in.
Okay, so next up, we can talk a little bit about peer and self-assessments. And one method that I really like that can foster student metacognitive skills is offering ungraded pre and post self-assessments on course objectives, program objectives, co-curricular, what have you, so that students kind of get a sense of upfront what I'm supposed to get out of this course. They can start monitoring how they're doing on those things, and then at the end, really appreciate how far they've come and assess their own growth. Another way to get at this is through reflective assignments. So whether that's a discussion board, a voice thread, whatever format you want, but doing it in a way that asks students to tie their learning in your course to their learning in other courses in the program, to their learning in like an internship or experiential learning component, or to their intended careers. I found that this really helps make it, less like that siloed experience. I'm just in this one course because I have to be in it, et cetera, to, how does this all make me a more well-rounded person when I graduate? And then include other opportunities for formal and informal peer assessments. We've got a few options here. So the first one being do a draft paper swap, right? Have students come up with, about half of their final term paper and then trade with a peer and then grade that assignment on the quality of peer feedback, not on the quality of the initial draft. So students get some practice giving and receiving feedback and then incorporating suggestions for improvement, or more informally, just have them swap papers in class and talk about how they feel about each other's papers. Another way that's really popular from a program I used to work with was including a formal peer assessment as part of a group project. So we know students don't always love group projects. It can take a little bit of, encouragement along the way to make sure that everyone's contributing equally. So one way to promote a little bit of accountability would be to include, something like a scale, maybe 1 to 5, or you qualify that with some language. How many points would you give your peers anonymously on their contributions to this project? So making sure that you clarify what that looks like up front, giving students, explicit instruction on how they should go about this rating, keeping it confidential, and then, taking maybe an average rating for a very small component of the group project overall. So this can kind of help make sure that everyone is contributing and make sure that students feel responsible for their own learning as well. Another method could be co-creation of assessment tools. So that could be something like asking students what kind of feedback would be most helpful. Maybe we assume that what they're looking for is, broad strengths and weaknesses from their paper or project. But maybe what would be most helpful is actually, additional citations or resources that relate to the topic, or de-identified examples of student work that, were exemplars that they could aspire to in the future. You could also ask students to describe how the feedback that they received in the past was used for improvement. So this can help instructors sort of hone in on what's the most effective feedback that students are actually using when I grade or assess them. Another way would be to ask students to identify which program learning objective or course learning objective they think aligns best with a given assignment. So not only does this help that metacognitive skill growth, but it also can inform your program assessment planning. So maybe you have this conception that, this assignment maps really neatly to this objective, but students are seeing it in a really different way, and that can give you some insight. As a bonus, you could also ask them to rate how well they achieved it and respond to that feedback. The last and my favorite way would be to ask students to participate in actually crafting assessment methods. So whether that's potential essay prompts, multiple choice question banks, or study guides, students can co-construct assessment methods by weighing in with their most important takeaways. So if you had to give an essay question or a multiple choice question, what would it be, and what would the answer options be, and what would the right answer be, and why? And then again, as a bonus, you could have students swap and maybe take each other's potential exam and give feedback.
So this is student choice and assessment, where we allow students to choose the topic of their assessment. We allow students to choose the format of their assessment. So, we think about universal design for learning, where we want students to be able to demonstrate what they have learned in your course. So we allow them to choose their assessment. Like, you get to choose how you're able to demonstrate how you know what the learning outcomes are. You learned what the content is in this class, and it's something that's engaging and creative for you, right? And it's also engaging for faculty as well, because then they get to see different facets of how what they're teaching can then be demonstrated. So it could be a paper, it could be a blog, it could be a podcast, portfolio, website, but I think it's more engaging to both sides and both parties, and there's just more buy-in. So we incorporate also active learning and assessment strategies. You want to know that what you're doing in the classroom, one, is not just for your class, but how it spills into your total educational journey, right? Nothing should ever be in a silo. You should be learning something and applying those skills to other courses and to real life situations. And also when it comes to assessment, and having that inquiry-based learning, it's hands-on. You get to really apply what you've been learning to real life, and so that nothing is ever just done because of the class. There should always be overlap. There should always be some type of continuum when it comes to your assessment choices.
Yeah, and I always really like this quote that we have at the bottom, that inviting voice and choice honors the humanness of learners, right? Students are not all, a monolith. They have individual preferences and opinions, and it's important to give them opportunities to express those through their learning.
Well, now we're going to go over some pros and cons of having a student-led council. Some pros that Isabella and I have experienced through our student assessment council are: students gain leadership experience. It fosters open communication, feedback, and self-advocacy skills. And then it creates a space for equal voting power. Some cons that we have seen is securing student commitment, engaging students from across the university, not just the type A students. There's also single voice fallacy, and there may need guidance on practicality and feasibility of ideas within existing constraints. Something that we also need to strengthen, especially the fact that the Student Assessment Council is in its trial stage, is recruit students from varied majors, years, performance levels, and backgrounds for diverse representation, and also dedicate support staff to advise within admin and faculty and guide students as needed.
Yeah, and one thing I think we had talked about earlier when we were were planning for this session was the importance of having that administrative backbone for the student-led council. You want students to be setting the agenda, to be in charge of the recruitment, to be making the decisions, but they also need stuff from us, right? We need to be able to connect them with the right resources and give them guidance as needed. You know, if the students say, okay, I think my major is too many credits, let's cut it to 10. That's what we've decided as a council, right? Probably not going to happen, probably not allowed, but we can dig deeper on that and say, okay, we hear you, but where is it that it's too many credits? Is it too many in one topic? Is it too much of one type of course that it's really lecture based, right? You can explore that with some guidance as needed.
Okay, so goals of the SAC is to educate students on the assessment process, engage students in the assessment process, help students provide meaningful, constructive feedback to their instructors to programmatic improvements, ensure student feedback is heard, and promote a sustainable dialogue. I've talked to a lot of these students, and some of them just don't want to do these surveys just because they don't think that their voice is heard. So getting them to do these surveys is obviously going to be hard, and showing them that their voice is heard and get somewhere. Strengthen partnership between students, faculty, and staff. And this is where the student council, as Krista said, we do need administration's help and faculty to like show the students that, you know, we're here for them as well. Yeah.
So here's our agenda for 2024 through 2025. We want to recruit student members for broad representation on the council, which is also one thing that we need to strengthen. I feel like we have a lot of sophomores and juniors and seniors, but not enough freshmen on the council. And when Isabella and I leave, as you know, I'm a junior and she's a senior. We need people to continue the process to make this council stronger. We need to establish a formal charge statement, educate the Student Assessment Council on program learning objectives, in which we did yesterday at our second meeting. We also need to apply program learning objectives to the work of the Student Assessment Council, analyze Qualtrics student survey data on feedback to professors, and then present findings on behalf of the Student Assessment Council at the MSCHE annual conference in December 2024, in which Isabella will be doing, and contact the Student Assessment Council with the Career Center for potential internship credit. And one thing that Isabella and I found very intriguing in our meeting yesterday was that not a lot of students knew what their program learning objectives were. And I feel like it really emphasizes how much, especially post-COVID, how much students don't find meaning in the work that we're doing. We're just doing it and it feels like very instruction based, and we're just encouraged to memorize instead of analyzing the purpose in which we are doing stuff. And I feel like it's partially our fault and also partially our program's fault because nobody really addresses it to us. So we're just used to doing as we're told instead of like finding the deeper meaning, which is how we should be motivated in life and motivated in our careers as well.
I just want to add to what Courtney is saying, because as you can tell, like there is a really big gap between the students and the faculty. Yes, we have you know, the faculty as professors, but as Courtney mentioned, a lot of these students did not know what their program learning objectives were for their majors. And as you can see, this is a big red flag. Krista?
Yeah, no, I think that's very well said. Thank you to you both. I just wanted to emphasize what both of you brought up about connecting it, right? That just starting with awareness is a great place to begin, but really connecting it potentially through this, you know, what you're exploring with the Career Center to your ultimate career outcomes is going to make this hopefully a more valuable, meaningful process to faculty and students. And then, of course, just a special shout out to Isabella for representing us at the upcoming Middle States Conference and being accepted for a poster presentation. So we're really excited for her.
In our well, it was yesterday. In our past meeting, we addressed the 4 questions. The first one was, do you think your program has fulfilled all of its objectives? Number 2, what do you think your program is lacking in its objectives? What programs do you think your program is fulfilling? And finally, what objectives would you like to add to your program? For the first question, a lot of students said no, and I could speak to this as a econ major. There was one PLO, I think it had something to do with analyzing statistics, and a lot of other students and majors also had PLOs connected to learning statistics and analyzing data. And what's crazy is that there was only one class in each major that fulfilled that PLO. And you would think, since it's a PLO, there'll be a multitude of classes to, connect it to. Another thing that a lot of students said in terms of question number 4, what objectives would you like to add to your program, is applying a lot of the content and intellect and knowledge that we're learning in class to real life. I feel like a lot of students feel a disconnection. It's like we're being taught stuff, but it's not being applied or related to real life as well.
So what can everyone do? Tell your students we are recruiting new members. Obviously, we're gonna send this out so they can click the sign up here. Seeking faculty guest speakers to talk about their PLOs and connect them to their course. Are there any other topics you should think the SAC should address? And obviously, you can email us at thestudentassessment@stonybrook.edu to submit suggestions and join us as a guest speaker. One thing that I wanted to say was, wait, can you go back to the other side that Courtney was talking about? Oh, yes. So, I had done a Qualitrix survey, and it's basically, we wanted the student feedback, and I put that in a Qualitrix survey. So if you guys do end up sending these to any of your students or want more of the student voice, I can also send you that Qualitrix survey, just because we know, the more people that fill out the survey will get a broader, diversity. And yeah.
All right, so how is SBU integrating student voice and assessment? And we're going to talk specifically what our department has done. So we support this student-led student assessment council. In 2023, we held a symposium where we had a student panel discussion on assessment. We went around campus and asked several assessment-based questions and then presented it during our symposium. Again, in 2023, we had those many interviews on assessment topics on campus. This year, and it's currently going on right now, we are doing student focus groups on select SBC categories in which we're asking a host of questions to see student perspectives on the general education categories and overall assessment. So we're exploring options for student exit surveys and or leveraging existing data collected by alumni relations to inform a more holistic program assessment process. So this is in the works now. We're hoping to have this at least piloted next semester to get some more information from students, not just where they're going after they graduate, but really how is their experience here at Stony Brook? Did they get everything that they initially wanted, or that they have hoped for, and that they feel that they have actually met the learning objectives for their major? So this is a work in progress, but we are always looking to do more and more assessment.
So I know we're just at about time. I'll leave these takeaways up on the screen. I won't read them to you because I want to respect your time and give our student panelists a chance to take any questions if you have any for them.
I have one question. Well, first off, I want to say it's so cool that as students you're getting involved, because that was how like I got interested in assessment when I was at Suffolk. I got involved in like our middle states committee as a student, so it was like a really cool way. And I think something that I kind of have found in my work, like with working with students, is students have a lot of really great ideas and a lot of really great feedback that they are willing to give verbally and like share with someone in person. But then sometimes because y'all are busy, you have your majors, you have your involvement, like there's a lot going on, asking to take the extra step of like, oh, well, like fill it out on this feedback form, or oh, like participate in this focus group. There's a lot of melt in between that of the people who have the feedback and then the people who are actually like going to take those additional steps. So from the student perspective, what advice do you have about potentially like encouraging students with those great ideas to kind of take that next step and follow through to put that feedback and ideas somewhere that is like helpful and useful in assessment?
Yeah, so me and Courtney kind of did this yesterday, and one of it was first talking about your student, like talking to the students and having a really good discussion about it. I feel like that will kick it up just one notch. And then right after, as you said, they'll have all these great ideas, what should you do? That's where I directly put my Qualitrix survey, and I left some time so they could fill it out because I know, like, a lot of these students will forget what they said, but I was like, can you guys do this for me right now? So leaving that extra time in a classroom setting or whatever setting really helps and motivate these students just so their voice can be heard as well. Courtney, if you want to add.
Yesterday, to add on to Isabella, we had one of our student assessment council members give us the advice to basically alter the way in which the surveys are given to follow the guideline of, I think it was the Division Affairs surveys, how they post one question and students answer that one question, and then it leads them to a second survey so they can add on to their feedback, which I thought was a really good idea. In addition to providing incentives, and especially what Isabella said, allocating some time if you're running a program, a class, to give students to answer the questions to your survey as well. Because as students, I feel like one thing we lack is time. So if you could just give us a little bit of time to fill out a survey at the end and then also structure it in a way where it doesn't feel like a burden as well, maybe by providing one question that can really encourage us to give you guys feedback.
As well as one last thing, one of the students had said to me, even just doing like prizes or maybe even extra credit during your class, like it doesn't have to be big, but like a 1 point extra credit, it gets the students to fill out their survey more.
Great. All right. So we do have all of our citations linked. There are a few that are in bold are the ones that we would recommend the most if you're interested in learning more about this. And otherwise, you're welcome to take our workshop feedback survey. We will be sending the link to the slides and recording out to all registrants. But thank you so much for joining. Special thank you to Isabella and Courtney for being here today and representing our Student Assessment Council. And wishing you all a great weekend, a great Thanksgiving.